Shalom, shalom, mishpachah. Welcome to another video from GoyaGroup.com, where we strive to bring everyone into one accord in the worship of Yahweh Elohim in spirit and in truth. Our channel focuses on removing religious lies to reveal simple spiritual truth, so that everyone is armed with the knowledge and the understanding of how to faithfully follow the will of the Most High. As always, we will be using Yahweh, which is Hashem, or the name of the Father, to bring honor to the Creator and exalt His name as is commanded in the Scriptures. There are a lot of lies that come from religion, and the corruption of the Scriptures are obvious. But this video series will focus on verses within the Bible that religious organizations use to promote doctrines, so that prayerfully people will be able to come to their own conclusions about these doctrines based on the facts rather than the beliefs given by others. This series will focus on verses that are often misunderstood or misused. The 66-book Catholic or Christian Bible has plenty of verses that are mishandled by people, but this series will specifically focus on those verses in the Bible that people are misunderstanding or misusing to support doctrines that could cause salvation issues according to the writings of ancient Yasha'al, who are known as the ancient Israelites today, and therefore they must be addressed. To anyone new to the channel, please understand we absolutely believe in the Most High and His commands, which include all the Nabim, who are the prophets, and His Mashiach, or Messiah, from the 1st century CE in Palestine. However, we do not ascribe to the religions that were created based on the faith system of the ancient Israelites, or Yasha'al, from that time, who were then persecuted and eventually totally exiled by the Roman Empire by the 2nd century CE. This is the third installment of our series, and will focus on the doctrine that the verse from the book of Revelation stating to come out of her is referring to religion overall, or more specifically, Christianity. Now, the Bible and the Scriptures as a whole does indeed direct people to leave from idolatry or fornication, which is to worship another power other than Yah, or to worship in another way other than what was commanded by Yah. But that verse commanding to come out of her is not about religion, but is rather about a place, specifically. And this will be evident by the end of this video. And this is indeed a salvation issue. This is Bible verses, misunderstood support doctrines, number 3. Revelation does not command us to leave America. The verse up for study is Chazun, or Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice come from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." That verse clearly instructs the reader to leave or come out of something described as a her, or else you will share in her sins and receive her plagues. There's no doubt about that, and if anyone seeks salvation, you definitely should not share in the sins of the her in that verse or receive of her plagues. The question then comes, who is the her described in that verse? Many rightly assume that this is referring to the great whore of Babylon, but wrongly assume that this is speaking of religion or idolatrous worship based on these verses. The verses causing confusion are Chazun, or Revelation 17:3-6. I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw a woman drunken with the blood of the Kudashim, or the set-apart dedicated ones, and with the blood of the martyrs of Yahusha. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. The arraignment and practices of this woman is definitely referring to religion, and more specifically, it is probably speaking of Catholicism or Christianity. The chief leaders of that religion do indeed adorn themselves in purple and gold, and absolutely drink from golden cups filled with idolatrous practices, which is absolutely fornication. Christianity originated from Catholicism. That is its root or seed, and thus its origin. This religion originated in Rome. Rome was the occupying force of Yehuda and Yerushalayim, which was Judea, and was literally the nation that was responsible for the extermination of the followers of Yahusha, who was the Messiah. Furthermore, the Vatican, which is Latin for divine serpent, and what the throne of the Pope is modeled after, was the driving force for colonization and chattel slavery. The papal decree of 1493 was Inter Caetera. I don't speak Latin, so excuse the pronunciation, in which he authorizes Spain and Portugal to colonize the Americas and its native peoples as subjects, as well as providing Spain and Portugal with the right to colonize, convert, and enslave Africans. This is well documented, and we will source all information claimed here in the description section of this video. The descendants of Jacob, or Jacob as he's commonly known today, were placed in bondage for 400 years by way of ships, as prophesied in the Bible. The conservative estimates of the death to this ethnic group was about 10 million, with some going as high as over 50 million in total. This papal decree was given by Pope Alexander VI, and one of the first ships was actually called the Jesus, and the term the good ship Jesus is actually a reference to the Jesus of Lubeck, which was a 700-ton ship purchased by King Henry VIII from the Hanseatic League, which was a merchant alliance between the cities of Hamburg and Lubeck in present-day Germany. This pope in question was actually Rodrigo de Borgia, who was responsible for the Great Rift, or the split of Catholicism, and brought about the Protestant Reformation, which is modern-day Christianity. Coincidentally, Rodrigo de Borgia's son, Cesare Borgia, was the image used by Leonardo da Vinci in his depiction of the Messiah as the Roman Christos, or Christus, that is known as the Christ and the deity of Catholicism and Christianity today. This image and the religious practices of this people have nothing to do with HaMashiach or the Messiah, and are definitely part of the Mystery Babylon system that is responsible for the blood of the set-apart ones. These practices did not start with Rome and originated in Babylon thousands of years prior to the Roman Empire, which is why it's called Babylon the Great. If you are into this mystery religion, you should definitely come out of that for sure. But this woman that passage is referring to is not religion, and is not the her or the subject of Kazun 18:4. As always, we must put the verse in proper context to obtain the proper understanding. To do this, we must go back to chapter 13 of that book. Kazun 13:1-2. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet was the feet of a bear, and his mouth the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and his seat, and great authority. There we have a beast made up of 3 different animals, and given authority of or rule by a 4th, which could obviously be Hashatan or the devil. But upon a closer study, we can see what this passage is really trying to convey. Many are confused by this passage and think this is referring to an actual monster rising out of the ocean. But what we have to understand is that this prophetic visions, and like all prophecy in the Hebraic corpus, or the Hebrew body of work, that is the writings of this people, they are congruent with other prophetic visions. When placing these visions in a greater context, the truth of this beast is made manifest. Let's go back to Daniel, or Daniel, chapter 7, verses 1-6. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream, and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I saw my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and may stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. This is the beast that came out of the sea, that was given dominion or rule, which is also authority. There you have your leopard, bear, and lion, and Daniel saw it more than 500 years before the book of Revelation was written. The Nabi, or prophet, in Kazun is seeing the exact same thing. We continue. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and had a great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This vision even includes the 10 horns from Revelation, but also includes information about it breaking into pieces or shattering. The two prophets are seeing the exact same thing from two different perspectives. These prophecies were just an anthropomorphization, or giving animal characteristics to human things, which in this case is kingdoms. This prophecy in Daniel 7 is a different version of the same vision that was given to Nebuchadnezzar, who just so happened to be the first king of Neo-Babylon, which is not the original Babylon prior to the Tower of Babel, which it was later named after, and is thus the original Babylon in the text, because Nimrud and his people were Cushi or Cushites and are known today as the ancient Sumerians. The point is, this dream by the king of Babylon was interpreted by Daniel earlier in his book. Daniel 2:1. And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep broke from him. Nebuchadnezzar was receiving visions, and it was so troubling he could not sleep. So he had all his magicians and seers to try to decipher this dream, but he couldn't even remember the dream. Daniel was given this revelation in a vision and was then able to discern their meaning. Daniel 2:19. Then was the secret revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the Elohim of heaven. This revelation of Daniel not only explained the king of Babylon's dream, but it also explains the kingdoms from his time to the end of the world. Daniel 2:31-35. You, O king, he's talking to Nebuchadnezzar, saw and beheld a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and the form of it was terrible. Now, an image is just a statue, okay? This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. You saw till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and broke them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. Not only do we have another reference to the breaking into pieces or shattering, but this also references the iron present in all the visions, which are the legs of the statue that the king of Babylon saw destroyed. And they all became like chaff on the threshing floor, which is a euphemism used many times in the Bible to describe those things that will be destroyed in the fire in the great day of judgment. And just in case there is any misunderstanding that these were in fact kingdoms, the prophet provides the interpretation plainly in the Bible. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Daniel 2:37-40. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the Elohim of heaven has given you a kingdom, power and strength and esteem. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven has he given into your hand, and has made you rule over them all. You are this head of gold. And after you shall arise another kingdom. See, he's referencing kingdoms here. Inferior to you. And another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And where you saw the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as you saw the iron mixed with merry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And where you saw iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings, or kingdoms, shall the Elohim of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break into pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. This image or statue represented the kingdoms of the earth from the time of Daniel until the time of the kingdom of heaven was to come and destroy them all. The kingdom of gold was the Babylonian Empire. The kingdom of silver was the Persian Empire. The kingdom of bronze was the Greek Empire. The kingdom of iron was the Roman Empire. These are the four kingdoms or beasts envisioned by the Nabim or prophets. Each of these kingdoms supplanted the kingdoms that came before them, and each became less illustrious than the one that preceded it. Gold is more precious than silver, but it is less strong. Just as bronze is stronger than silver, but less valuable. Iron is stronger than them all, but is the cheapest and less eminent than all the others. This is speaking directly to the degradation of society. The world and its kingdoms are getting increasingly worse, and not better as modern society would have you believe. The Roman Empire, or the Legs of Iron, was not destroyed, but was rather assimilated by the Anglo-Saxon tribes of Scandinavia. These are the toes that mixed with miry clay. These were the them that tried to mix with the seed of man in the text. These were the 10 toes, or the 10 kingdoms, described in all the visions that ruled the world from the time of the final collapse of the Roman Empire in the 16th century CE until 400 years later, which is today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the time of the 10 kingdoms. The Club of Rome proposed in 1973 that the new global order include dividing the world into 10 economic trading blocks, with the first map of a 10-region division was done in their 1973 report, Regionalized and Adaptive Model of the Global World System. The question comes, what kingdom rose out of the sea that is a mixture of all the cultures and the 4 kingdoms that came before it? The simple answer, I think you already know. It is the United States of America. It is commonly referred to as the melting pot of culture and sometimes called the divided states by many because of the obvious strife and division within it. Though compelling, this is not our only proof, and we will continue to study the book of Revelation, and as stated, this will be made evident. Now that we have the context of Kazun 13, we can move forward in the narrative to explain what Revelation 18:4 is actually talking about. We move to chapter 16 to the point after the 7 Malachim, or messengers, commonly referred to as angels today, poured out the 7 bowls of the wrath poured over all the earth. Kazun, or Revelation 16:17 through 19. And the 7th Malach, which is a messenger or angel, poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done." And there were voices and thunderers and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before Elohim, to give into her cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. After all the plagues are poured out into the earth, there will be an earthquake unlike anything that has happened on earth since the creation of mankind, which has obviously not happened yet. At this point in the text, we have the first reference to a great city, and that it will be divided into 3 parts due to this unimaginable earthquake. Now we have come full circle, and are right at the part where we started in Revelation 17 about the woman in the vision. There is no need for us to try and decipher its meaning, as the book is called Revelation, which is to have something revealed, and thus provides the meaning for the reader. Verses 7 and 8. And the Malach said to me, "Why did you marvel?" He's talking to the prophet, which is Yachanan there. "I will tell you the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The Malach is giving the understanding or revealing the truth of the woman, the beast, and the 7 heads with the 10 horns. There's no need for us to try and figure out what any of this means, because the Bible tells you directly. The beast that you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. They that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. The beast is something that is of old and from the pit of hell, and yet did not exist at the time of this writing. The beast in this passage is your religion. Roman Catholicism and its Christian offshoots did not exist at the time of this writing. but was of old and directly from the devil. The book of Revelation is commonly accepted by scholars to be written and circulated sometime in the late 1st century CE. This book was written before the formation of Catholicism, which later became simply known as Christianity, and is referenced by one of the creators of that religion, Eusebius, who, in his church history, which was around 330 CE, mentioned that the book was accepted as a canonical book, yet was rejected at the same time. Revelation 17:9. And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. The 7 heads refer to 7 mountains. Many people like to logically claim that this is a direct reference to Rome because it was known as a city on 7 mountains. Totally logical. This makes sense. However, the issue becomes that Rome did exist at the time of this writing. And if the beast did not exist at this time, then the 7 hills that were the 7 horns of the beast obviously did not exist either. This has to be something that came after the time of this writing in the 1st century CE, and even after Rome itself. A little known fact is that Washington, D.C., which is the capital of America and the seat of power for that country, was renamed Rome, Maryland. It was originally called Rock Creek, Maryland, as the original name of Prince George's County, Maryland, which would eventually become Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. Rome was specifically the name of the area, including Capitol Hill, which the United States Capitol building sits today. In 1663, the property that would eventually become the site of the U.S. Capitol was inscribed in the Maryland property records as officially Rome, after the owner of the land, who was a man named Francis Pope. He apparently made a play on his name and changed Rock Creek, Maryland, which you can see in his map, to Rome, Maryland. The southern boundary of this property was the Tiber, which was purposely shaped to emulate the river that runs through Rome, Italy. Also, just like Rome, Italy, Rome, Maryland, or Washington, D.C., has 7 hills, whose names are Capitol Hill, Meridian Hill, Floral Hills, Forest Hills, Hill Brook, Hill Crest, and Knox Hill. Kazun, or Revelation 17:12-13. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength to the beast. The 10 horns are 10 kingdoms that will have one mind and be confederate to give their power to the beast or religion. These kingdoms did not exist at the time of the writing and were future kingdoms. Therefore, this could not be speaking of 10 kingdoms associated with Rome, Italy, but are rather speaking of the 10 kingdoms associated with the Rome in America. Kazun 17:15. And he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the whore sits, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So the waters where the whore sits upon are people in general and various languages. The divided states has the most people speaking different languages in the world, with over 300 million people and 340 different languages. That statistic may seem different or wrong to you, but it's the truth. Papua New Guinea, for example, has the most languages spoken, but they only have 8 million people. Indonesia is second with 710 languages, but they only have 267 million people. Nigeria is third with 515, but only have a population of 195 million. English is the most widely spoken language spoken in the entire world. The text tells us plainly who the beast is. It is religion. Specifically, one did not exist at the time of the writing. The horns are the 7 hills. The kingdoms are those who have come up after this prophecy and is given authority by religion or the beast. And at the end of the chapter, it also tells us who this woman is. Verse 18, and the woman which you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. The woman is not religion. The beast is. The woman is the great city, the one that rules over all the rulers of the earth. Without question, America is seen as the leader of the world and rules all other nations with an iron fist. No one can stand up to her, and if they do, they are immediately broken to pieces. If this still feels a little thin, we will rectify that issue when we go into chapter 18 and prove plainly who this great city is. The context of the chapter is continued from the chapters that we just gone over. The kingdom that rises out of the sea is a combination of the four great world powers before it and rules the other nations of the world. Babylon the Great is the whore, who is the great city that is ruling over everything, and it has been given power by the beast, which is religion. America is the great Christian nation of the entire world. Kahazun, chapter 18, verses 1 through 3 here. And after these things I saw another Malak, messenger or angel, come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his esteem. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. America has gotten all her allies rich, and as long as you follow her example, you'll become wealthy as well. The verse of our study is speaking about the great city and not religion. Back to our study topic here, Kahazun or Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you do not be partakers of her sins, and that you do not receive of her plagues. Come out of her is specifically talking about coming out of the great city as defined in chapter 17. After reading these verses, no one can claim that Babylon the Great is religion, but some may still believe that this is talking about Rome, Italy, even though this had to be something that did not exist at the time of the writing of Revelation, and Rome did indeed exist at that time by 500 years at least. But the divided states as a country and world power did not, so we will rectify that with these next few verses. Verse 7. How much she has esteemed herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. The United States is by far the wealthiest country in the world, and lives deliciously well beyond her means. To live as a queen and not see any sorrow or be a widow means that you have never been defeated. Rome, by this time in history, had already lost several times and was definitely widowed. They were invaded and defeated at least 6 times by this point in history, and were well accustomed to losing and had no illusion about never being defeated. America has never been defeated. People like to point to instances such as the Vietnam War, but the U.S. never lost a single battle in that conflict. All conflicts with natives resulted in the U.S. gaining territory and expansion with the constriction of indigenous people. Only in the War of 1812 was the U.S. or Rome, D.C. ever truly invaded and the White House was burned down. But even that resulted in a U.S. victory through a draw because they directly rivaled the world power at the time, which was England. When all the native people were displaced and the U.S. took control of the Spanish-controlled West Florida, thus solidifying the United States as the new world superpower. America is fueling the world economy, and no nation can survive without her or her dollar. Even the conflicts with China right now over trade. China has a distinct disadvantage because their economy would collapse without American consumption. This is why the next verse is so crucial in identifying the great city or the whore of Babylon. Verse 11. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buys their merchandise any more. Rome never consumed all the world's merchandise, and when they fell, the world economy moved on without issue. If America falls, the entire world economy will collapse, as proven by the 2008 financial crisis and the current issues in 2020. The divided states is definitely a resting place for devils. It is number one in imprisonment, the number one user of pornography, child pornography, exporter of war, and child trafficking. If you live in the U.S., you are paying taxes of some kind. Even if you do not pay income tax, you will pay sales tax on the items you consume. Those taxes are used to fund misery and death throughout the world. all while degrading society as a whole. If you pay taxes there, then you are participating in her sins, whether you want to or not. We will now provide a commonly misused analogy from an experiment to make our point. Many are probably familiar with this one: the frog and the boiling pot. A frog is placed in a pot of water, and if you turn the temperature up fast, the frog will immediately jump out. However, if you increase the temperature very slowly, the frog will stay in the pot and eventually die. This is misused because most do not understand the meaning of the analogy or the results of the experiment in respects to the circumstances of the frog. Many think that the frog is unable to detect the rise in temperature and is tricked, so it dies. That is not the case. In truth, the cold-blooded frog understands that the water is getting warmer and closely tracks an increase in temperature. The ability of amphibians to thermoregulate is severely limited. The frog expends energy to cool down by constantly taking oxygen from the surrounding water as if it were hibernating. If the water temperature is increased slow enough and it gets too hot, the frog no longer has the energy to leave and it dies. Even though the situation with the frog is psychological, the lesson of the analogy is not about being tricked. It is about trying to acclimate to an increasingly bad situation to the point where you can no longer get out of it. If you have the means, and even if you do not, we advise everyone to come out of her as commanded in the text. If you do not want to take part in her sins or want to receive of her plagues, then come out of her, my people. As always, we appreciate your time, and please feel free to comment or ask questions in the comment section.